Chapter 11, Program Maintenance and Evaluation. This is the final quote-unquote chapter of a traditional business continuity cycle. You could start this continuity cycle later in the cycle and then end off somewhere else because it's a cycle. But anyways, this is the last section in our main parts of this video series. When you're doing program maintenance and evaluation, when you finally kind of reach the end, as it were, which is really just the new beginning, when you finally get here, you need to be honest and decide, is the purpose of this program to check a box? Is the purpose of this program to be prepared? Is it both? Why are we here? I have seen many clients where they'll say, yep, we want to be risk aware. We want to, make sure that we're prepared for X, Y, Z. They talk up this perspective of virtue towards doing the right thing. And then we get here, and then the mask slips, they get honest, and really it's because they want to make sure they qualify for this thing and they check a box. And the purpose is because they're trying to check a box. They don't really care. They're trying to check the box. That's fine. This is okay. Many people who are in my discipline or ones that are adjacent from it will feel disheartened from this. It's like, well, if this was just to check a box, what's the whole point? Just because the goal is to check a box doesn't mean that the other stuff they didn't learn wasn't valuable. What it does mean is that if the goal was to check that box, you better make sure the box is checked. So with that in mind, when you're approaching program maintenance and evaluation, there are different styles that you do. If the goal is to check a box and they have a particular standard they're trying to meet, like NFPA 1600 or something, if they're trying to meet one of these standards, there's probably a section in the annex with a checklist that the auditor is going to use to audit that says, did you do this, conforming, partially conforming, non-conforming, that sort of idea. And what you can do is you can get one of these standards, you can look at it, you can take a pen and a clipboard and go, did we do it, did we do it, did we do it? And frankly, if the goal is to meet the standard, you should probably do that. And that can be the bulk of your program maintenance and evaluation, because that's the point of the program to this organization. If the reason why continuity exists is to make sure that they're meeting a specific standard, and if that standard doesn't exist, or if you're not doing that, then the continuity program ceases to exist, then you better make sure you're meeting that standard, because that's the reason why you have funding. That's the reason why you're even there. And existing at all to meet something that you may or may not personally agree with as a professional is superior to them doing nothing and giving up. There are different ways to meet a standard. If they have a particular standard, and I'll pull a quote of a standard. The plan shall address the health and safety of personnel. Well, there are many different ways to address the health and safety of personnel. There are many different levels or degrees at which one can address the health and safety of personnel. There are many ways to interpret that. One could do very little and address the health and safety of personnel, right? There's a lot of play in there. It's up to the organization and the people involved to figure out how they want to interpret that. But look, if you have a standard like that you need to meet, and some of these things are pretty straightforward, the entity shall identify hazards and monitor those hazards and the likelihood of occurrence. That's taken from NFPA 1600. We did a risk assessment. You did a risk matrix. Shall identify hazards, they're in the chart, and monitor those hazards and the likelihood of occurrence. Well, the monitoring part has to come in with, well, how often have we come back and done this? What went into that? That is, depending on the hazard, that is not hard to do. This is not that difficult to do, but there are different ways to do it. Anyways, if your goal is to meet the standard, make sure that what you're doing meets that standard. If your goal is preparedness and the standard is non-existent or secondary, frankly, with how easy some of these standards are to meet, you can go way above and beyond without a lot of effort. So if your goal is to go above and beyond the standard, then it's different. Then you're looking at, okay, what are we doing the next cycle? You're looking forward, you're thinking to the future. Okay, what did we learn? So when you're in that part of this, when you're looking at how do we move on, how do we continue this process, there's basically 3 steps. I phrase this differently depending on the way you perceive this, but the way I put this initially is, first, you want to determine what you learned. Second, you want to find out what you missed. And then third, you want to decide what you're going to do about it. So what did you learn? We did this whole thing. What sort of new things have we figured out? We scoped stuff in our program design. And throughout this whole process, we figured, it would have been nice if we did this, but we can't because it's not in scope. What are those things? What stuff did you miss? What did you intentionally miss? That's fine. It was part of the way you designed the program. You intentionally miss things you're supposed to, so that you can do them later when you come back around. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Once you take all that information in, you then have another 3-step process you can go through where you want to list it. Now, a lot of this, frankly, will come from your after action report and come from the exercising section and come from various other things you've said throughout the whole process. But have a list of everything that you're going to think about moving forward. And it might be a pretty lengthy list. Then go through the list. I call this triaging the list, because triage is making a decision where you have insufficient resources and you have to basically choose what you're going to keep and not keep. So this is a triaging process. What you're going to do is say, okay, I have some stuff that I'm going to definitely act on right now. I have some stuff I am not going to act on. It's not happening. And I have some stuff that I'm going to consider later. I have some stuff that's kind of a maybe. So you're going to list stuff, and you're going to triage it, and you're going to figure out what you're going to do about it. When you decide to do something, to not do something, to hold and reconsider something, you should know your reasoning for that for each thing. You should know why you're doing that. You're making potentially very significant decisions about the organization right now. You should know why you're making them. There are some very good reasons to not do things. You may have certain suggestions that have come up that are prohibitively expensive. They're just not happening. Okay, and the reason is we simply cannot afford it. That is more expensive than the risk it's trying to protect. Okay, whatever. But you want this list of stuff. When you come back to continuity strategies in the next cycle, you may remember that other ideas that didn't work yet section, you could be grabbing from your previous program maintenance and go, okay, let's run these through again and see if it's worth it. See if they're worth it now. And they might not be. And that's fine. But you want to have that thing that you can come back to. And that's pretty much it, right? Like, you have your standards. You can run through them if you care about that sort of thing. You may or may not, depending on your business. If you're something like a bank, you probably do. If you're a smaller, like, family business that doesn't have a continuity standard really apply to it normally, you might just be doing this because you want to be more prepared, fine, but the standard is really secondary. But if you have a standard, you can run through it. And then you have your lessons learned, and you try to figure out what you're going to do with those and how you're going to set yourself up for the next cycle. And that's pretty much what you're doing. And then really here at the end of this, before I get into annex and other parts of the book, I finished the book off with a few kind of notes that I want to re-emphasize. What matters is doing this process, not doing it perfect, but doing it at all. Repeated iteration is critical to this sort of thing. Once you finish, you're already out of date. You're better than you were before, but everything is changing from beneath you. So don't get stuck on perfection. Focus on iteration and repetition. At the very end, I put in big, bold letters, now go back to chapter 2, program design, and do it all again. Because that's what you're doing. You're just going back and you're doing it all again. So frankly, you could take this video and go back to program design and repeat playlist, because we're doing it again. And eventually, maybe you will do that fail exercise. Maybe we will get into the Chapter 5 complex BIA and lose all our hair. Maybe we will do all these other magical things. Maybe the scope will get bigger or different. We did something that was the store level, and now we want to do something that's more of a district level. Maybe we, did something at district level, and we know we're good there, but we want to do the store level now and get really specific. Maybe we did one for one store, and we have 50 locations, and we want to replicate it and do 49 other ones at the same time. But now that we've done one, we have a template, we can kind of speed that along. Whatever. Where are we going next? But we're going next is pretty much back to Chapter 2 is where we're going next. Continuity 101.